Okay, so first question. How does Gemini and Android Studio compare to other tools like Gemini CLI? Let's start with Ale.
Great to be the first one. Yeah, that's brilliant. I guess, Gemini and Android Studio, well, I guess it compares to other AI agents in that, you can prompt it and it will, give you either a result or it will like perform the task for you. So that's like super useful. And then obviously, because the thing with Gemini and Android Studio is that because it's on the Android IDE, you have a little bit of more higher expectations that what it can do and what it should do. So I think it's fair to assume that it's tailored for Android and that it will fetch the latest and greatest and the latest best practice and the latest tooling and not use any deprecated APIs, which may not always be the case because of the nature of how agents work. But I guess that sets up the expectation. It is the best of all of the agents in that it already comes with the ID. What else can you want, right? Whereas the other ones is like more if you're in the outside in a terminal on a client, like Gemini client, you're in a terminal or any of the other products that are more without the UI based. That's another positive if you're like more used to handling UI. The fact that it has a little UI tells you the steps of what it's doing. It's like kind of nice. It's more friendly. But it allows you to do many other things that other products in the industry does. Like, attach your context and your images and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think that's an overview. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So like the integration point, the Android specific integration points, I guess. Cool. Thank you. I want to hear from a few more folks. Maybe Joe can be the next one.
Yeah, of course. I think that I covered it really well, actually. So I think, yeah, having it integrated in the IDs is really helpful. And I think as well for me, it was my first entry point to using AI alongside my code. So it felt like it was holding my hand a bit, let's say, with the prompts and the ability to see exactly what context is there and be able to control the context and, click a button to add an image or a file. Whereas when you're working with command line tools, you're a bit more in the weeds. And I understand a lot of people are comfortable with that, but I think if this is your first entry to AI, then there's a lot of guidance there to help you with that. So I think that's one of the main things that stood out to me to begin with.
Nice. Okay. That's a good starting point. I also want to hear from someone who actually worked on it directly and indirectly. Diego, maybe you can share a few thoughts yourself.
Yeah, no, I think that basically we have covered most of it. I think that one of the advantages is because it runs within the IDE, it has access to a number of tools that are not accessible to other agents. So we have access to the indexes and all the symbols that are there. So one thing that I find particularly useful about Android Studio is it can find usages of a class in a faster way. So it doesn't need to use grep. Or where the agent makes mistakes. If it writes something that it doesn't compile, it realizes about it very quickly because it has the ability of using the analysis of the file. So all those things actually make for a better experience than some other agents when it's integrated there. Plus, it is tailored for Android development, so it has knowledge of what is great or how to invoke it, and it doesn't really need to just try in the command line. So it's very good.
Makes sense. Thank you. Let's move on to the next one. Can Gemini and Android Studio build an entire Android app from scratch? Let's go to Trevor with this one.
Yeah, wonderful question. So we've actually, you can use agent mode today in the stable versions, and that'll certainly help you across every stage of building your app. Is very capable. But we're working on a new feature called New Project Assistant, which integrates Gemini with the New Project Wizard, where you can give it a prompt and optionally screenshots, and it'll actually build your entire application's scaffolding, architecture, compose layouts, everything from scratch. It also integrates with the Android emulator, so it can deploy it, walk through your app, and make sure that it's functioning correctly and that the rendered screens actually look like what you've asked it to build. So this is in active development. You can get it in the latest Canary builds. And that is how we'd actually recommend using that workflow. After it builds that app, of course, you can continue to work in agent mode and iterate on the application. Yeah, we're actually really excited about it. And so the short version answer is yes, especially with the latest builds in Canary.
Cool. Yeah. One thing that I really liked around it, when I kind of played around it, was the generation of the markdown plan as well. Like, it gives you really good insight into what it's going to do.
Yep. And one thing I'll add, if anybody is trying this, we do recommend using this feature with the bring your own Gemini or AI Studio API key feature, since the latest builds are actually using Nano Banana behind the scenes, and so we do need an AI Studio API key to access that. We're working to improve that, so that way users without an API key will get that same performance. But right now, to see the full capabilities, you do need to add your own API key.
Good point to mention. This is something that we internally also sometimes forget to do. So it's good to share it with others as well. Cool. Okay, so moving on to the next question, because we have a lot to go through. How do I handle hallucinated code for new libraries with sparse documentation? Let's hear it from Ale, how she handles this first.
Okay, yeah, hallucinations. Not only Gemini and Android Studio, but all the models, I think they gotten way better with this. I think at the beginning it was like more of just, I am going to invent what the code should look like and hope for the best. But now not only, and I noticed that in Gemini and Android Studio, not only it knows that if it gets it wrong, it's able to correct it, and it's able to run the commands to compile, and no, this doesn't make sense. I need to try again and try harder, and it's able to recover a little bit from that, but it's not perfect. This happened to me recently with implementing a glance widget for Compose, which is the new way of building widgets for Android with a kind of Compose, sort of, but not really syntax. And what happened was it kept trying to use elements from the Compose library as opposed to the glance library. So yeah, the way that I realized very quickly that it was probably not gonna be any better than that. So the way that I try to go about it is go old school and find the latest post by someone from the community that has already tried to go old school and read the actual documentation, providing the latest documentation right through context. We're gonna hear about a lot of context, the quality of your prompt and the context that you provide the model. So yeah, can you check this, literally, can you check this documentation and can you check this blog post? And here's some sample code that I copied also, like that. This is how you're supposed to do it for this and this. Please use this API. So yeah, I try to do it without very handcrafty, if you will.
I also want to cover this topic from Jose's perspective, because we kind of worked on something that partially solves this issue or entirely solves it. So.
Yeah, so one of the things that make Android Studio's agent a little bit different from generic agent is that we added some tools that let you have access to the Android documentation. So if you look at the list of tools, you'll see search Android docs and fetch Android docs. And that gives you access to what we call the Android knowledge base, which is a collection of articles. That is that's something that the model can choose to use if the model thinks that it's missing some information. Especially when you use it's good, especially when you use niche APIs or APIs that are not that common. The model is not going to use it if you want to move a button in Compose by 4 dps, but if you try to migrate to Navigation 3 or you're interested in Android XR, then it will probably try it. If you are sure that you want the model to consult the documentation, a very handy trick is to add something along the lines of search the official documentation or check the docs to your prompts to make sure that those tools are hit. And we're working on tweaking how much those tools are triggered, but for now, that's the best way to make sure that you're using the latest documentation. For documentation on different libraries that are not Android specific, I suggest installing an MCP server that lets you access documentation like Context 7 or something similar.
Cool. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next one. Does agent mode have autonomy to perform complex refactors across multiple files? Let's go to Diego with this one.
Oh, so I guess that the simple answer to this is yes, it does. The slightly more complicated answer is it depends, right? It depends on the complexity of the refactor that we're talking about. And it's always good to find some guidance in, for example, if your code has like really good tests for the area that you are migrating, if you have already documented in agents.md or in any markdown files what that area of the code does, and then you're asking for a refactoring, you have a lot more chances to succeed in a refactoring. Also, it's probably not a good idea to just go to the agent and ask like, oh, rewrite this module in a completely different way. It is, if you have an idea of what you want to do, the agent can be extremely helpful at basically taking steps towards that. So maybe not in one prompt, but like maybe in 3 or 4, you can achieve like a fairly complicated migration. That said, we are obviously all the time working on better tools. So one thing that it helps a lot with keeping the agent on track and being able to achieve this type of task is planning. So we are working at the moment on better and better planning tools. So the agent can ahead of time plan what it's going to do, and that helps a lot with this type of migration that is going to span across many, many different files. So yes, basically it can do it. At the moment, like it's better to kind of like split into small prompts and give some guidance to the agent. But in the future, with better and better planning agents and better models, this is something that is going to get only better.
Thank you. That's quite useful to hear. Cool. Okay, so let's move on to the next one then. How do I ensure agent uses our custom frameworks, libraries, and design systems? Let's ask Joe this one to see how he deals with this in his apps.
Of course. Yeah, so there's a couple of ways to do this. I think one, Android Studio does provide a way to provide rules through the Gemini settings, so you can specify rules that should be followed when Gemini is performing these actions for you. But your best bet is probably going to be creating the agents.md files in your application. And essentially what this allows you to do is specify exactly how things should be done and will act as guidance for when AI is performing tasks. So if there are specific frameworks you want to use, you have design systems or specific ways of doing things, this is exactly what I do in my projects. I tell it exactly how the architecture is, what things to do, what things not to do, and all in the standard like bullet pointed way to give AI clear instructions. And you can also there's generally an agents.md file at the root of your project, but you can also have them in like the different modules of your project as well. So the more context you have and the more guidance wherever you're working, that will be available for AI to access. And if you get stuck on creating these agents.md files, then you can use AI to help you build them or give you the foundations based on the projects you have, and then edit them, because it can be a bit overwhelming if you're starting from zero.
I think Jose approves this answer very much. Is there anything you want to add, Jose, to this from your side?
No, not really. I think that was perfect. I will maybe add something that you can definitely point to other markdown files inside of your code base from agents.md. So if you don't want to have a massive agents.md in the root, you can definitely say, if you're creating unit tests, open this docs/unit test.md file or something similar, and the model is going to be smart enough to read that file and add it to your context. That way you don't misuse or waste tokens. But yeah, start simple, as Joe said. Start simple and then build from there.
Yeah, there's a lot of trying, failing, and fixing with this whole thing. Cool. Okay. Thank you for that. Let's go to the next one, which is, what are the differences between the default and the paid model? Trevor is the best person to answer this.
Yeah, great question. So it's worth noting, first off, you don't have just one paid model. There's several different ways you can pay for Gemini and Android Studio. There are subtle differences between those, but I'll speak generally here. So across all of our paid models, the biggest change is you're getting priority access to the Gemini 3 models. So if the system's under heavy load or you're sending a lot of queries, the default no-cost model can actually downgrade down to older, less performant models, whereas the paid models are generally not going to do that. You also get more quota with the paid models. So if you're making heavy use of especially agent mode, that can exhaust quota very quickly. So that would be a reason you'd want to be on a paid model. And then also the paid models get access to the long context window models. So that's the 1 million token context windows that Gemini 3 is known for. Whereas the default no-cost model uses a much smaller context window. And the two cases where this matters is, again, if you're using agent mode, that uses up your context window very quickly. It still works with the default no-cost model, but you will get slightly less accurate, slightly less relevant models because the context window can't keep your entire conversation history. Also, if you have an extremely large code base, that also, of course, uses up the context window as well, too. So those are both great reasons why you'd want to be on a paid model. Also, very important note here, if you're using any of the different options for paid model access, we don't use sessions from those users for model training. So the paid models have additional privacy baked into them.
Good to know. Thank you, Trevor. Okay, we have a few more pre-voted questions, but because I'm the host and I have the power to do this, I'm going to break this up a bit. And let's do like a quick round of things that, at least for me, would have been very helpful to learn from all of you if I was like starting Gemini and Android Studio journey for the first time. So what are like the most useful tips and tricks or ways you use Gemini and Android Studio in your daily workflow that are actually helpful? Let's start with Ale.
Oh, wow. Okay. Useful. Yeah, just be very intentional with, again, in the case of Gemini and Android Studio agents, the context that you give, the things that you can tell it not to do. Like you can be very assertive in the things that it shouldn't do, going as far as to tell it, please do not invent stuff up, which is very fun if you think about it, but you can definitely do that. And I like to use it sometimes as when I feel like it's already done and I review the thing, hey, what can you improve of this piece of code? Can you make it simpler? Can you like, do you see any fundamental problems with this? Especially on the things that I'm not super certain about, like, is there any security risk here, or a part of the code that looks a bit suspicious? Will this carry any race conditions? And I like to also do that every so often for fun, where I know that there is no problem, that I fixed it. Hey, what do you think of this code? Do you think there is a problem here? And see what it invents if something. I've been very lucky with that, so I don't have to keep contesting the models. But yeah, that to sum up, yes.
Like a brainstorming buddy in a way as well. Thank you. Joe, you're up next.
Of course. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is a couple of things is images, because when you added the ability to add images for Gemini, that's a game changer. So anytime you have any kind of reference image design available, default to using that, because I think in my experience, that performs better than me trying to type it out. And so it could be a me problem, but the images perform very well. And I think another thing as well I try to do is keep things simple, especially if you're starting out with AI, like break tasks down into smaller things. And it's just better for getting, more focused results and setting your expectations. So yeah, I think those would be the two key things that I try and follow.
Thank you. Let's go to Jose.
I think one of the things that I tend to do is in my context, so in my agents.md, or in any file that is added to context on every task, I add a line saying, if you are making any big changes to the architecture or the general approach or the general design of the app, make sure to edit this file with those changes. That goes actually a really long way, or that at least you modify the documentation with those updates. That way, you don't have to even maintain your documentation. The agent will do it for you. And I had a lot of success with that. And also, it's like whenever you see that one of the documentation, one of the markdown files has been modified, you're like, it added Roboelectric to my project. I wasn't aware of that. So it's a good way to have a very overview of what's going on in your project.
Okay, let's go to Trevor next. I want to hear from all of you on this one.
Yeah, so as already mentioned earlier, but very briefly, agents.md is very powerful if you're using agent mode. Adding documentation per directory can give the agent a lot of information about how both to navigate your project and what libraries and coding conventions exist. So it saves a lot of time and a lot of guesswork as the agent tries to figure out how to go and navigate and change things. That's the first one, but also I'll just briefly mention, because not many people seem to know about it, is the prompt library feature. So under Studio settings, you can use the prompt library to add custom prompts to the right-click AI context menu. And it's a great way to go and build lightweight tools. Those prompts can be incredibly detailed. You can even have the AI ask you follow-up questions. So I've used it to really just create some very quick custom additions to my Studio toolchain.
Great, thank you. And finally, Diego.
Yeah, so it has been mentioned a million times. So I have a bunch of markdown files or agents MD where I tell the agent a bunch of things that I want to keep an eye for. So I use the agent all the time to double check on my changes and make sure that they stick to the style or to the use of coroutines that I want in that area. So that's one thing. And then in how I use the agent, I use it a lot to do things that I don't want to do. So from writing commit messages, so it does give you already a good summary, then you review it, you save a lot of time. Or to write tests, the agent is really good at doing things. If you know what you want, you can say, I need tests for this and this, and it will basically look around the other test and it will write a very good test. Basically, or to write a new parser for a new JSON file, that type of thing. I think that it's really useful. You give it the JSON file, you say, these are my other parsers, and it will help you generating those. Tons of good usages.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next pre-voted question. What project context does Gemini use, and can I control code use for training? I think this is a two-part question. For the context bit, let's talk to Jose, and then for the training bit, let's talk to Trevor.
Yeah, sure. Very briefly, you have absolute control of what is sent to the model from the agent. So you can choose to send the current file, the recent files, agents.md, rules, etc. In addition to that, you can also, something that could have been a trick for the previous section, you can use the command to insert files directly in the prompt or to reference them. That is actually really handy to say, look in this file and search for this other thing without actually having to include it in the list of recent files. And maybe Trevor can talk about controlling code use for training, although I think he already mentioned that, but I think it's important enough to repeat it.
Absolutely. So I did mention this earlier, but if you're on any of our paid plans, so that's bringing your own Gemini or AI Studio API key, or if you're subscribed to Gemini Code Assist, which is the offering for businesses and teams, we do not use your code for model training. We're also, just as an aside, rolling out integration with Google One soon, which will also be another option for paid plans, which will similarly, if you are paying for that, we do not use your code for training. So Yeah, as the general rule, if you're paying, we don't train off that code. I will add, though, even if you're on the no-cost plans, you have a couple options to opt out some or all of your code from training. The first option is you can add a AI ignore file, so .ai ignore, just like .git ignore, uses the same glob style pattern matching, and you can use that to hide sensitive directories or sensitive files from the AI. So anything you add there will not be included in the context window. Also in Studio settings, of course, you can always opt out of context sharing, either on a per project or per user basis. Though if you do this, it does limit the functionality of a number of features because the AI won't see your code. But if you are on the no-cost plan, these are ways to control what's shared with the AI.
Cool. Makes sense. Thank you. Let's do another pre-voted one, and I'm just conscious of the time, and I want to use some of the questions from the chat as well. Explain giving direct tasks to agent versus individual features like individual features like generate, compose, previews. So I guess that means what's the difference between talking to the agent or triggering the individual features. Since Diego worked on this, maybe he can give a bit of more information on this.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So in many cases, you can achieve exactly the same going to the agent and crafting a prompt, and you build something that can achieve the same. The difference, it depends on the specific feature, but the difference is we have already spent that time crafting the prompt. We have already spent the time into looking at cases and how to make the agent behave better. So you are saving basically time by using the action in that sense, because we are also testing it all the time, and we can basically know for every model how the action reacts. So that's one thing. And there are other actions that actually go a little bit further, and they're a little bit more complicated. So one thing that we can do, as we know, models are very sensitive to context. So if you put a lot of things in the context, then they are less effective. And some of the actions, we can pre-filter that context because we know what is interesting for that particular use case. So that's one thing. We already built everything around it in terms of the best practices for that particular use case. So that's another thing that we save, and you don't need to spend time building that prompt and teaching it about best practices. And last, another important thing is in some cases, we also filter the tools that the agent has access to. So that simplifies the life of the agent because it can go in a much more precise way to act on the things that it needs to do. So instead of giving it all the tools for certain actions, we say we know that you are only going to need this, so you don't need to worry about looking files in this particular area. So that goes hand in hand with the context thing that I said, but also tool selection. So yes, the answer, the summary is you can do it. It's just to save you time, and we have spent already the time crafting and testing those prompts.
Can I ask also how this looks like on the other side when you actually use it? Ale, do you have anything specific to share on this or a similar note?
Yeah, well, I was kind of thinking between giving it a gigantic instruction where there could be multiple, not points of failure, but points of where you maybe don't agree with what the agent can do if you haven't been super specific. Like implement the currency converter for my wallet app, whatever. And you can be longer with your prompt or whatever, but I guess there is more points in which you can maybe not do what you want, as opposed to, take this composable and generate the previews, or split this composable. It tends to add a lot of composables into the same file, split this file, add the previews, and add the modifier, the default modifier, so my detect rules pass, blah. And so definitely just to begin or have something going, the give it a gigantic task can definitely be a quicker way to get things going. But then probably you're gonna have to iterate it a little bit. So a hybrid approach, is always it's always the way to go. You review your code and then you give it a little bit of smaller instructions, and then you get to the point in which you're happy. So I think that's how I've been dealing with this. If that makes sense, yeah.
Nice. Thank you. Okay, let's move on a bit to, there's some still pre-voted ones, but I want to go through at least some of the chat ones. There's quite a lot of them, so let's start with one for Joe maybe, because of how much he actually shares with the community about learning materials and help educate other Android devs. There's one question that says, I'm just starting my career in Android development. Any advice for folks how to learn quickly using AI for building and shipping fast?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think this is an interesting one, and I think at the moment the thing is with AI, especially if you're maybe newer to development, I think AI can be great at getting you started and getting you up to speed and building stuff for you fast. But I think the thing is like making sure you understand what it's building and still being involved in that building process. So maybe still being very hands-on and involved in the actual creation of the code and like understanding what's working and how it's working, and then you can use AI to help explain things to you as well. And if you're not sure how something works, then AI, you can ask AI. I think I want to say back in the day, but back in the day when I was learning to code, had to go and Google stuff and hop back and forth between like to look up documentation how things are working. But now everything is so integrated, it makes that a lot easier. So yeah, I think AI is a powerful tool for helping you learn quicker, but it's just making sure you still understand what it is you're building.
That makes sense. Also, like if anyone wants to jump in with anything to add, do jump in. Okay. If not, let's move on to the next question. There's actually a few questions, although it might be from the same person, about are Google AI Pro users also exempt from their code and data being used for training?
Yeah. So yeah, I can take this one. So I actually alluded to this earlier when I mentioned that we are going to be rolling out Google One integration soon. We do not have Google One integration today. So if you have a the Google AI Pro plan as part of Google AI One, Google One, excuse me. So yeah, Google AI Pro is part of that Google One integration. So right now, Studio doesn't look at any of your Google One subscriptions, so you don't get any benefits in Studio today with those plans, which does mean that we're not able to offer the additional privacy protections or anything else for that matter, just because Studio doesn't see that you're subscribed. We're working to fix that quickly. We'd like to be able to offer not just additional privacy protections, but also access to the additional model choices and expanded context window and everything else you get from being on a paid plan. Stay tuned. It's coming very, very soon.
Thank you. A bit of news as well in this. Cool. Okay. So, Ale, can I ask you, there's a question. Have you guys built any application as a hobby or for fun using agents?
Yes. I just when I was like kind of trying to like testing the different agents, you take one of those ideas that you always wanted to do and you do them. So yeah, definitely. The first thing that I tried to do with an agent back in the day was like the contacts app on iOS, which I didn't know how to do. Or I wasn't an expert on iOS back in the day. But yeah, just like little sample apps that I always wanted to do or get to. Code samples to test different composed layouts, my own implementation of the flow, the overflow row layout that now has been deprecated on materials, so I'm implementing my own version. And for the most part, it's been like super fun, super fast, and it works for the most part, and you understand what it's doing. So yeah, definitely yes. It's very good for that to get to the 90%, right? I haven't put those things like, the for fun is important here. I haven't put in those things in production or haven't productized them, right? So I guess that is something that I haven't tested that it can, like, agents can help you with, right? But we apart from that, we definitely use it in code that does ship to production. So that is not a blocker at all. But yeah, all those little projects that you always wanted to do, now there is no better time than today to give them a go.
You mean there's no more excuse to postpone them? Nice. Cool. Okay. There's another one. Okay, I'm just going to read it out loud. If the agent is working on anything, can we give it a prompt in between to guide them or point them in the right direction?
Yeah. So you cannot really keep it in between. You can definitely type and you can send it. And what we will do at the moment is we will queue it. So like the moment that the agent actually goes through the things that it's doing, it will pick it up. So that's one way of giving direction. One thing that we all seem to be very scared to do, and that works very well, is if you think that the agent is going in the wrong direction, you can stop it, give the prompt immediately and say, no, do this other thing. And that will work. So it feels like when you're going to stop it, you are going to kind of like break it in certain way, but like you can definitely press the stop, say, hey, I see that you are doing this. I actually would prefer this to happen in this way. And that's another way of correcting it. If you just type it, it will be queued and the agent will keep going. If you think in the wrong direction, it will keep going a little bit more down the path.
Great. Okay. I'm gonna wait for some of the live chat ones to pile up a bit. Let's maybe go back to some of the pre-voted ones because there are some really interesting ones I still want to go through. There's one that says, does Gemini ensure compatibility and respect my minimum SDK version when suggesting new APIs? We've kind of touched upon this partially in some of the answers, but maybe Joe, if you want to jump into this one and explain a bit more, if you have any recommendations as an active user.
Yeah, I would reference back to the comments I said before about the agents.md file. I think having information, about your project requirements, SDK and such in there is helpful, even though it's already in your project code. It's helpful to have in there because your AI agent is going to go there to look for this information. So having it accessible is helpful. Yeah, in terms of actually like those specific things, like I found that on first attempts, it's usually the agent's usually using what I need, but I have found on like if I'm saying, oh, this isn't quite working, then we'll go back and try and use like older things that may be deprecated, and you have to give it a little bit of a nudge to tell it to add like the SDK checks. But yeah, that's one thing I found so far, but overall it tends to work quite well.
Thank you for that. So it all comes down to like providing enough information through the rules and the agents MD, it seems.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. We have another one says, what enterprise management tools are there for Gemini and Android Studio in the workplace? Trevor.
So we offer integration with Gemini Code Assist. For those who aren't familiar, Gemini Code Assist is our bundle of tools for AI developer productivity. This includes not only Gemini and Android Studio for businesses, it also includes Gemini plugins for IntelliJ, for VS Code, Gemini for BigQuery. It includes Gemini CLI, of course. And once again, that also includes the business offering for Gemini in Android Studio. So that's integrated with the Google Cloud Management Console. So it means that your IT admins can centrally administer everything just alongside everything else they have in Google Cloud. We also integrate with Google Cloud security models. So it's tied in with IAM, if you're familiar with Google Cloud's permission system, VPC service controls for managing where your security boundaries are for data, is tied in with audit logging, so you can track and monitor how and where your company is using AI. It also integrates with Google Cloud's Developer Connect feature, which means that you can connect Gemini Android Studio to your other Git repositories, not just what's visible in your current Studio workspace, but all the other projects across your company. So that way, if you have, say, some libraries that developers might frequently use, Gemini can be aware of those. And then we also tie into the monitoring tools in Google Cloud, so you can build an observability dashboard and track how and where employees are using AI organizationally to monitor if these tools are being adopted. So once again, that's all part of the Gemini Code Assist bundle. One thing I'll also just add to, since we talked about the paid tiers a little bit, that's also sold on a per seat cost. So it's a fixed fee per user rather than per token, like if you use an API key. So that's something we've also heard from a number of companies that they found to be very helpful in planning how they roll out AI at scale across large organizations. So I just like pointing that out.
Okay. Thank you all. I think we've even pushed the time a bit longer than we originally planned, but I think that's pretty much all that we have the time for. Thank you all. This was really nice. It's nice to see you all, and this was a nice chat. And thank you all for the really good questions that you had for us today. I hope we were able to answer at least some of them and help you out with some of the understanding some of the things around Gemini and Android Studio. Here we have some helpful resources that you can look into, specifically around Studio, the agent mode, some learning materials, how to download Studio, obviously, and how to download the Canary versions, and also one of the important ones, which is how to file a bug. Please do file bugs. Please submit any feedback. We definitely look into it and we take it into account. And sometimes it takes us shorter, sometimes it takes us longer, but we get there. So yeah, thank you all and have a great day. See you soon again, hopefully.